Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, welcome to Moving Forward. Tonight, when I should be fiery, I'm somewhat subdued and in a melancholy mood because of hearing the death of my colleague's wife who passed a week ago. I feel slightly depressed as I try to internalize what life is all about. As I've said before, that even though we live 100 years, we are only in this world for a short time. Yet we continue to think that we are immune from that day when our lives ceases to exist in this world anymore. Before that day comes for me, what I want is to be involved in promoting a just society in what we call St. Lucia. Why? Because I remember Mahatma Gandhi striking words during my studies when he said, "A nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members." Therefore, the question I ask is whether the last government we had, who seemed more concerned with its family, friends, and foreigners, ever gave a damn about the weakest members. In truth and in fact, what did they do or have left behind that is of benefit to the country as a whole after 5.5 years in office? It is sad to say absolutely, again, nothing. Why? Because the leader had no loyalty and integrity. He also did not inspire confidence. And his form of collaboration was also, for me, something that was not desirable. He cared more about making headlines, and there was a string of vanity within him because he was simply not humble. The country needs leadership. It needs stability, and it will certainly not get it with the past leader and jokers that we had. Tonight, I don't want anyone to think that I am speaking in a malicious manner or I am what is termed an academic, which my Prime Minister calls me sometimes. But here I am to say to you, my brothers and sisters, that I'm not speaking as one who have never seen the burdens of life. Yes, I have had my fair share of disappointments, and I'm still having such. I have learned to forgive because I must say quite categorically that I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect because no one is. However, I'm searching for that perfection. The Prime Minister we have is no different, and that is what is good about him compared to the last. Our present Prime Minister is one who listens, and when you listen, you can give a good response. That was not a trait that the past leader of government and now opposition leader had. Therefore, he must stay out in the wilderness for years to come, or until he leaves politics. Yes, I have spent a few weeks sleeping on the sidewalks of England at night in my youth, even while I was at Kensington College, and used to wash up at some stations where there was bathroom facilities. Sometimes I even slept at the college itself, under the desk. Therefore, when it comes to dealing on issues like these, I am well versed, especially where poverty is concerned. However, when it comes to understanding and dealing with issues of dishonesty, I have the background and training to assess what is and what is not as far as dishonesty and alleged corruption is concerned. So tonight, brothers and sisters, as I look back, I want to ask the leader of the last government of this country and its higher echelon a straightforward question. Did Cobalt, DSH, the call center in Viewfort, and those who were paid so much on the dam project ever contributed to the betterment of St. Lucia? Many St. Lucians will not have remembered that it was the then Prime Minister who paid, that is, the then Prime Minister, Allen, who paid everything for the call center. Yet, when they had to invest, after years in St. Lucia, they quickly spent 78 million investing in Grenada, not in St. Lucia. How can that be right? Then yes, we had Cabot, who came and used NIC money to buy lands with the blessings of the then Prime Minister Alan Chastanet. That is when we were told that the buyer was supposed to be a millionaire or billionaire. Some have been cynical to say that they have given back something to the government. But to whom in the government, may I ask? Who are the so-called benefactors? I say this in all sincerity, that I am not that gullible. Therefore, if I have to assess, I would say that allegedly, that the then higher echelon of government, family, friends, and certain foreigners, like themselves, were the benefactors. This was the biggest con hike ever seen in this country, and carried out, not openly, but in a manner that was deceitful. What bugs me is the charade that took place sometime after that deal. Yes, what further infuriated me is that our best and rarest cactuses or cactus in the world was not thought of in making that deal, nor was Donkey Beach taken, which was taken into consideration as one of the beaches that the humpback turtle comes to spawn every year. And if the government and DCA had not changed, that beach would have belonged to the developers. They would have been controlling our rare beaches. How can this be right? And the later demonstrations should have, in my view, been sooner, from the day the deal was being signed and not later. The last government did not care about the priceless part of the country's nature reserve we had on this lovely island of ours. It was the same with the Pitons, which had become a World Heritage Site under the UNESCO and other leading advocates of precious land sites in the world. It was seen as unique, but not to the few who allowed foreigners to build at the foot of the Piton, thereby endangering the whole heritage title. These reprobates have literally made millions on our lands, which were bought cheaply, and to add more insult to injury in the wounds, it was literally with our money, and now they are real millionaires because they were allowed to borrow from the NIC, yet nationals could not do so. What upsets me is that lots of the profits do not stay here, but goes overseas. Therefore, I want to ask a simple question to the last Prime Minister. Was he aiding and abetting Cabot then? This is a simple question. I would like to ask Alan. I would also want to remind St. Lucians of this, and for them to make their own assessments of the situation and the deal that took place then. What I would further like to ask Alan, in all sincerity, is whether he or any of his ministers or family had shares in Cabot. I'm asking these questions because many have alleged so. Some are of the opinion that it was the first time in our history that a PM facilitated the developer to get access to money in order to buy land. Is that true? Sadly, the developer didn't go to a commercial lending agency to access the funds. That is true too. Yet the Prime Minister told us that he was a billionaire, as mentioned before. This act surely showed disrespect for our intelligence. The question is why Cabot didn't go through a lending agency to source the funds. The more one thinks of it, the more one realizes that we have been duped, literally duped. This transaction, in my view, the special prosecutor now must delve into with the efficiency that is needed. Now, once again, I want to deal further with the DSH affair, which I mentioned last week. All I want the last government to do is to produce the land deal that was made with DSH, which include the 188 acres of land leased to T.O.R. King for what was called a racetrack. Then further to that, I would like to see the transactions that took place with the so-called land sale of 500 acres, which Alan spoke about, which was sold at $60,000 an acre. Can that be true? St. Lucians, we cannot afford to allow those con merchants to pull such a colossal set of con tricks, which is being peddled and displayed under our very noses, because we are not the mendicants that this last leader, who is a product of Canada, thinks that we are. Not only that, I go further to ask, which government, DCA, had to deal with the canals deal, that our mangroves became part of the deal, which is supposed to be sacred? What it literally shows is that the then government never really did care about the treasured gifts that we got from the One Most High. This last Prime Minister thought he could have broken the rules and regulations as far as our heritage sites were concerned, because he simply did not care and thought that his skin color and his father's money can buy and sell what he wants, like the small-minded brat that he is. This individual spoke about colonialism. That's another one. And in his view, it had a conscience. Can anyone believe that the Prime Minister of a black country speaking in that term, in that manner? This immediately should have sent a signal to the population on the whole. He simply did not understand what he was saying, because his whole makeup made him think that he was superior to the peasants of this country and mendicants, I suppose, and that we were still somewhat colonial. Let me remind him of what the great Marcus Garvey once said. A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a time without roots. And went on further to say that we have to release ourselves from mental slavery. Alan, in my opinion, wanted to develop a society that could suppress our black culture, history, heritage, achievement. And when he saw the opportunity of killing part of that culture, that is when he thought that he could bring in to the country what he termed the sport of kings. Have we forgotten that, ladies and gentlemen? We should all take a bow to the horse kings as far as he is concerned. What he was without a doubt saying to the younger generation of Vieux Fort is that you don't have a culture, and that colonialism is all you really have. His action made it clear that, and it became a reminder to me that here we are, an independent country, yet we still have the now King of England as our head of state. In my view, it is simply diabolical. This is simply ridiculous, and not only that, but our courts have not changed, even though we don't have to go to the Privy Council in England, because now our final court of appeal is the Caribbean Courts of Justice, brought in by this present government. However, we still call our police force the Royal Police Force. Therefore, when an Alan comes on the scene, how do we doubt him when he says colonialism had a conscience? Therefore, he made that abundantly clear in the manner in which he merely told our youngsters in Vieux Fort that what they were doing every Sunday on the tarmac were for little minds, and therefore made every effort as Prime Minister to curtail the joy and culture of those young people. That is the man we had as Prime Minister, and now leader of the opposition. Nevertheless, some idiots in our midst want to bring him back. Well, I say to them, they can have all the song and dance with their paid attendees this evening in the boulevard, but they will never come back to lead this country ever again. There is doubt that as long as Alan, Guy Joseph, Nancy, Spider, Dominic, and a few non-entities like their chairman and his Christmas barrels fiasco will never return as the government of this country. A third, genuine force will make it before them because their reputation at this present moment in time is laced with scumbags and people of alleged repute. They are confined to the wilderness for years to come until they revert back to Sir John's United Workers' Party, and not as it is now, the United Wreckers of the Poor. Brothers and sisters, Alan and his nincompoops must be made to answer the serious allegations that are being made against him during his time as Prime Minister, just as he is prepared to make accusations against others in the government at present. And the worst of it is that he does not see his accusations as allegations, but facts. Therefore, we must be relentless in getting the facts from him in those deals he made, which, without a doubt, contradict our Constitution and our laws. If he fails to do that, so then it must be left to the courts to handle. As a High Court mediator and one with a Master's in Conflict Resolution, Mediation and Arbitration from London University, I trust that I am in a position to make a reasonable assessment on the deals that emanated under the last government. And in my view, some are definitely fishy and needs to be investigated thoroughly. What I'm seeing in many of those deals is that they seem unbalanced, in that it suited those who put it together while in government for their own purposes. Therefore, I do hope and pray that the so-called special prosecutor is doing his utmost best to unravel and the alleged malpractices that borders alleged corruption, which some believe took place under the last government. What bugs me, brothers and sisters, is that there was an individual who was supposed to be a banker before becoming a politician and minister of government. He tells us in all sincerity that he never read what he signed in terms of the DSH deal. If he had, he would have realized that in theory, some parts were contravening our rules and regulations, just as we saw with the $7.3 million deal in terms of COVID-19 vaccines, which broke constitutional rules and regulations. If colonialism had a conscience, well, these people don't. Not only that, I ask in all sincerity whether the PM then had broken finance laws and regulations. What we have seen with all the deals that were done by the last government was the desperation they were faced with, because overseas investors were not coming to invest in the country. Many foreign investors basically, they had a good idea whom they were dealing with, because they saw this individual during his time as the Minister of Tourism, and he was simply lousy, so to speak. He did not have one hotel built in his time. Not only that, he was spending money like a leaking bucket in his boxing in paradise fiasco, if we have to bring it forth, and hiring an individual at $100,000 who came up with nothing after his contract ended. Can that be right? He told us nothing new about tourism. We were left to think about it for ourselves. It was simply money thrown away. And that was the individual leading a country of 180,000 people who were not doing too badly before he came on the scene. Here we were now, becoming a lonely island of poverty, where 90% of the people were living from hand to mouth, while others were unable to have 3 meals a day. Yet the very few were living as though they were truly in paradise. For 5.5 long years, that was simply in any man's language, unacceptable. COVID-19 was a classical example when the idea of the Fortuna Doctrine came into being. And I will take my first break because it is important. Welcome back to Moving Forward, and I was talking about the Fortuna Doctrine during COVID-19. When a government can try to destroy a sport that all Viewfortians love, that is, their bareback racing of young horses on a Sunday, which gave joy to the community, and it became part of the cultural activities of that part of the country, then this government needs to be kicked out of sight. However, in their authoritative manner, they tried to stop that activity and, above all, used a lot of the country's money and even borrowed to put what was termed, as I've said before, the sport of kings, which meant, again, the leasing of 180 acres to a Chinese foreigner who had no part of this country. Ladies and gentlemen, to date, the sport of kings literally bankrupt the country, and which has cost the people of St. Lucia a fortune. And these individuals, now out of power, wants to go to the boulevard in Castries tonight to try to convince us that the present government is the worst that we have had. Can you believe it? I am sure that will be coming out of their political, polluted, poison and pathetic mouths. In any language, whether in social psychology or otherwise, I would call them narcissists. There is no other word I can think of, because they're the leaders of the opposition also. When their leader tried to explain to us what a con artist or con merchant was all about, not realizing that he was describing the higher echelon of his party and a few followers who are in it for what they can get out of it by supporting them. What a nasty web that these individuals weave. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last 3 years, what we have seen is that Philip Joseph Pierre, as leader of the country, is trying his best to live up to Mahatma Gandhi's words. He has placed increasing emphasis on living up to such lofty ideals by working to enable all citizens to benefit from St. Lucia's economic development, which is without a doubt taking place. Only a fool or jackass or mendicant will not be able to see that, as they are part of the opposition, because their leader called them the mendicants, jackasses, and barking dogs when it suited him. I hope that he was not speaking about Labour followers, because, as I've said before, if that is so, and he is expecting his meeting in the boulevard this late afternoon evening to impress any Labour supporter or undecided voter, then he and his party are living in cloud cuckoo land. I tell them this in all honesty, that they will be in the wilderness for years to come. The facts and figures are there to show that during your time, or their time in office, from 260 to 21, you, Alan, and your cohorts were all about conning the public as the poor got poorer and the rich friends got richer. I'm not making that up. I follow the facts and the figures. And as a seasoned researcher, I can prove everything I say because I have the facts at home. If you can doubt that, Alan, Remember in 2016 when you met me in Taiwan, I was a research fellow at the highest research institution in the country and even in Asia. And it was called Academia Sinica, remember? Therefore, I must have some ability to have been accepted there when few are accepted with applicants from all over the world. And this little black boy or man entered those halls of academia. I may not be handsome, but I have a damn good head on my shoulder and will not bow to any man or woman at that. Nor will I be bribed into anything that is unjust to the people as a whole. I try to be truthful as ever and honest to myself. My father has always drilled into me those few words, ladies and gentlemen, and that is, to thine own self be true, and thou canst be false to no man. When you see, what you see is what you get. And you know that, Alan, when you tried to get me to go to Taiwan as an emissary, as I've mentioned before, I simply refused on principle. That is the type of man that I am. I cannot be bribed by petty handouts to satisfy anyone's ego or satisfaction of a leader who uses its followers as mere mendicants or otherwise. Tonight I used a headline that is coming from the leader of the opposition at one of his meetings when he says quite categorically, enough is enough. Enough of what? Of the Labour government? At first I was somewhat bemused by that title and thought that he was talking about the present government. But I suddenly came to the realization that he was talking about his United Records of the Poor. Especially when they were kicked out, people said enough is enough. I simply deduce it in that there was not much that they can do to ever get into power in the next 10 years with himself as leader and the bubble boys and girls he has at the echelon of the wrecking party. Ladies and gentlemen, I come to you tonight as a true son of the soil, and we also now have a prime minister whose heart and soul makes him an even bigger son of the soil. That is why when he speaks about what we can grow to eat for our survival, we should not laugh, but take it seriously. Mamai Leba, as they say, and Alan tries to say now. Now is the time in our lives to regain that vibrant culture we once had. And the Prime Minister is making every effort to bring Creole in every nook and cranny of the country back. Because we can jump high or low, it is our language. And we cannot run away from that. It is without a doubt a language and a culture, and we must do everything in our power to cherish it with all our heart and soul. There was at one time in our lives, after independence, when we had some civility in this beautiful country of ours. Now we see that politics have begun to poison our minds in the last 3.5 years, and bodies. So much so, many are prepared to harm, hurt, and insult one another because of the party they support. Where is the civility in what leaders like the individual who leads the opposition have done to this country? I want to say this to all St. Lucians. I believe sincerely that good opposition makes good government. But to be honest, I'm seeing things differently because of the vague and disgusting opposition that has emerged in this country. The government is excellent because they are a caring government. My only beef with them is that they should be talking seriously about making us a republic. And that is why I see that our Creole culture should be revived in a wholesome manner. The colonial claptrap should now be abundant. More so when this reprobate tells us that it had a conscience. This guy, one can see, love the limelight in meeting those white leaders because he thinks that he is a party of them, to them, because he thinks he's white, not realizing that they see him as a jackass that he is. Did he not call some of our people jackasses? Not realizing that overseas he was thought of in the same manner? Yet today they are prepared to deal with a black leader that they did not want at the time. I will never forget what I saw in his mannerism with all the high dignitaries when they were here. That's Alan. And he was talking about the SH. Yes, the spot of kings. And he failed to realize how pathetic he was. Before we go any further, let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Oh, Father in heaven, give our Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip Joseph Pierre, the help and strength he needs to help all the citizens, all of the country, more so the old, the disabled, the sick, the poor, and destitute, and also the young in our midst, who need the guidance of those who are able to help them in their lives. The young in our midst, more so those young men who are unable to control their temper in a minor argument with friends, family or otherwise, and think that killing is the only way out. Oh Father, send down the Holy Spirit to guide them as at least on the right path. The Prime Minister can do so much, but those in the communities who can give the help do come to the aid of the country and put us back, help to put us back on the right course. This has not been done for the Prime Minister, but for the survival of the country. We place our trust and faith in you, O Lord, because without a doubt, you are the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. Amen. Tonight I quote from the Bible, the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 3, verses 10 to 13. The ungodly, however, will get the punishment their wicked thoughts deserve because they rebelled against the Lord and ignored what was right. A man who has no use for wisdom or education has a miserable life in store for him. He has nothing to hope for. His labors are useless, and he will never accomplish anything worthwhile. The woman he marries will turn out to be irresponsible, and his children will go wrong. All his descendants will be under a curse. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Oh, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, as I speak to you, the country's opposition party, as I mentioned before, are out there casting aspersions and using their energy to blacken the name of every minister they can on their lips. And propaganda as is their only weapon against this government of Philip Joseph Pierre. These are ungodly people, as pointed out by the Wisdom of Solomon, where he's quite succinct when he says that the ungodly, however, will get the punishment their wicked thoughts deserve because they rebelled against the Lord and ignored what was right. This is what is taking place on the William Peter Boulevard this evening. Here we have a bunch of ungodly people, unknown entities gathering like jackasses to spread alarm and despondency about a decent prime minister and government. What amazes me is that they make all the accusations they can, yet they have not got one shred of evidence to justify the accusation they make. Even on CIP, which they are, without a doubt, the guilty party, but they look to an alleged fraudster and jailbird in 2 countries to help them with their propaganda. I will say this again and again. I believe that sincerely, that I will not stand for people who are dishonest in whatever party they come from. The trust must always be my guiding light, not money or position or fraternizing with the higher echelon of society. That is certainly not my scene, nor has it been part of me. As I said, my father again taught me, thank God, that humility, and therefore if I thought that the present government was heading in the wrong direction, I would try to help. But if they ignore me, as some have, I would walk away. I don't play games. I remind my listeners what my father again always taught me, and that is, to thine own self be true, and thou canst be false to no man. Therefore, I'm happy and proud to back the present Prime Minister, Philip Joseph Pierre, and the manner and ways he's going about to bring about that equal society that is necessary, to bring about peace and tranquility in this land of ours. What Philip has been doing is in an admirable manner, is improving the local standard of living for our people. Once again, I want to go back to what I spoke about last week in terms of Guy Joseph, because he said it in the public domain, and I'll come to that as I take a break. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And before we break off, I was talking about last week in terms of Guy Joseph, because what he said is, and that is in the public domain, this individual made the statement that every time Philip opens his mouth, it is an embarrassment to St. Lucia. In what ways is that so? May I ask? I don't know. First, let me make it clear that on numerous occasions, I find it hard to understand the unadulterated filth and utter crap that comes out of Guy Joseph's mouth, because his English is so bad that he sounds as if it's coming from the sewer of English-speaking people. This guy simply has the gall to make such a statement about Philip Joseph Pierre. Yet he was the same who said that on one of his marches, that they had people as far as the eye can see, or could see, which later proved that he was hallucinating. And not only that, on another occasion he says that there were coaches as far as the eye could see, with so many people inside, but much of it were youngsters allegedly paid to be in those coaches. Yes, Philip sometimes stutters. Is that a crime? Have we not heard the leader of the opposition do worse when he speaks? These two individuals who are at the head of their party, and who, in my honest opinion, that is Guy and Joseph and Alan, should leave politics, because they will never win as long as they have a hole in their backsides. They are finished because of their alleged dishonesty in everything they do and say. And one can go to the Ministry of Infrastructure, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, to see his fingerprint on some transaction that Stephenson King just could not stomach. And that's allegedly. I said to these individuals to search their conscience before throwing stones. Last week I mentioned the looking glass self, and also those who live in glass houses should not continue to throw stones, because one will come back and shatter that glass house they live in and will expose them to the world. That is now happening to these individuals. But they simply have no shame or pride in themselves to understand the harm they are doing, not only to themselves, but to the country. Oh, I forgot that I'm speaking about barking dogs, jackasses, and mendicants who seem unaware of their misdeeds because they're too thick to understand that. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at Alan, all I see is what was termed in the past the great pretender. However, I must say that a chill confronts every sinew of my body because of the lies and deceptions that this individual who led this country at many times into things that we should not have been in. He somehow managed to corrupt many minds within his party, but God is in his infinite wisdom entered the minds of some who now see him for what he is, a con merchant, a dishonest individual, and a liar of a magnitude so great that it is merely indescribable. Alan is coming into office. Alan, in coming to office, did not see the poor and those most vulnerable in our society, because his mind was in a class which puts him above that, and he thought that it was the upper class. If we remember, he made it clear that his class did not vote for him, something or words to that effect. What a statement to make when you are representing the country as a whole. What is so outrageous? As far as I'm concerned today, out of office, this individual now wants to be the champion of the poor. Can anyone believe that? Yet, here was the guy in office sanctioning the Fortuna Doctrine. This man as Prime Minister did not believe in investing in poor people, yet here he is making, in my view, an outrageous statement that people are suffering and need relief, as though this government has caused it. Yet here is the Prime Minister who stopped, here's the Prime Minister who stopped every project that the Labour Party had put in place when he came into power. The first we saw that was given some relief was the Soufriere Square. This man spent $20 million on an incinerator that has never been used. And I still want to know the whereabouts of the money that was destined for the dump. And not only that was $1 million paid for an alleged report that was never received. Can one imagine how much of that this government can use for income support instead of having to borrow or beg for such a project or for any project? I want to bring a little history to the fore, because the last general election and what I wrote to the then PM, and I quote, "All I want you to do is to come clean to the St. Lucian people. I want to pinpoint out to you that in every dark hour of our lives, there is a leadership of frankness and one of vigorous necessity in the development of our country. If this was achieved by you, then the understanding and support of the people was essential. If you had any chance of winning the 2021 elections, I am therefore convinced that the people have lost faith in you and will, I'm sure, not give you another chance of leading this country apart from the poodles who follow you and refuse to face the truth because they are too blind to see for one reason or another." Between 2016 and 2021, values had shrunk to a dramatic level. Tax had risen somewhat. Our ability to pay our debt was diabolical. There was a serious curtailment of income for many. But the view is that the withered leaves of industrial enterprise laid on every side. More importantly then, a host of unemployed citizens face the grim problems of existence, hence the incubation of crime that has now been released. Only a foolish or dumb poodle or poodles who are optimistic for one reason or another would deny the dark realities that during 2016 and 2021, when the St. Lucian government only gave priority to those who bend to their whims and fancies. I wrote that then because I had made an in-depth study of what was taking place in our country. I'll take a break then and I'll be back. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was talking about something which I wrote before the last election, just, then. And then I want to say, therefore, as I say to you, brothers and sisters, that is a piece of history that we never want to be repeated in this country again. And without a doubt that they can say all they want and promise all they can tonight in the William Peter Boulevard, but it will be blown into the skies by the wind into oblivion. There is simply no way back for men and women who have allegedly ransacked this country of ours. And many are of that view when I speak to them. Therefore, brothers and sisters, instead of having this silly fanfare in the boulevard, if you really cared, as you said in the House, leader of the opposition, you could have said to your poodles, let us prepare for that great day of celebration in honor of Julian Alfred. And the country can, on that day, come as one to celebrate a conspicuous occasion. Therefore, your speech in the House was all talk, peddled with lies and dishonesty. It was all a show, which was meaningless, abhorrent, and distasteful in every shape and size. You are without a doubt the alleged narcissist, as I've mentioned before, that many see in you. They are seeing it now with Trump in the United States. So tonight, before I close, there are two areas I need to come back to, and that is the desilting of the Roseau Dam and the $7.3 million that was literally given away during COVID-19. And I'll continue to remind this last government of this. There is no doubt, as I mentioned before, that financial rules were broken. Then again, Allen said quite categorically, and I quote, "It is not criminal, so why should I bother?" This, in my view, is the attitude of a bigot who thinks that he is answerable to no one. I'm looking at this in the context of one of their meetings, when one hears that they are encouraging their youth to ask about CIP monies from this government for health, etc. When in truth and in fact, they never did any of those things during their time in office. This is so misleading. When the then government virtually did nothing in that manner towards health, and now they forget that they were the leading architects of the CIP. I therefore ask this youngster of theirs, why did the party she support do what she's asking of this government? Why is that? I want to point out tonight that there are some people who are disturbed by the Rosa Dam project. They want to know what were the terms of reference for that project, including the scope of works to be executed. The contract must have deliverables for the money. The company can't pay so much for 3 managers, yet end up with only 8% of the work done. This does not add up. It must be very embarrassing for the German government to have paid 500K, that's US, for consultancy, and these guys guys to a different path. They went on to a different path to execute the project. They didn't go on the right path. Ladies and gentlemen, I saw a comedy, and I hope you did see it too. That is where Guy Joseph at a meeting said that, I quote, "So you all want Alan Chastanet to bring back evidence from Washington, D.C.? in a very distasteful manner." And I'm going to CIP. He went on to say, in Creole, "Zot comparaison ça." Guy then went on to say, again quite categorically, that Alan never promised that he would bring back evidence from Washington, D.C. on CIP. Yet on a previous program, Alan made it clear for all to hear that there is a lot of evidence I will bring back with me. I'm not saying that I have it, you know. You could go on whatever you see and find it. Well, there was annoyance at the meeting because obviously, having met the fraudster, it seems as if, that is, in my estimation, it's as if they were both fumbling in the dark. Because maybe, just maybe, there was nothing to be had from Martinez. It seems as if this individual thought that Alan and the United Records of the Poor would give him some evidence or more evidence that would enable him to feed his lust, an ego. But that was not forthcoming. Therefore, the journey, in my view, was the wasted one. On his return at one of their meetings, again, we hear Alan clearly saying, and I quote, "To hell with Martinez." The question is why he had to utter those words in such an aggressive manner. Was it disappointing when he went there? Because it clearly shows that he was disappointed that Martinez had no evidence but what was allegedly given to him. And therefore, Alan went to Washington on a wild goose chase. That's my view. Could be yours too. Well, you can fool some of the people some of the time, Alan, but not all of the time. What Martinez was hoping is that you would be able to bring a minister of government with you. The man is without a doubt an alleged fraudster to the hilt. And you all should know that by now. That should be the end of the story now. In closing tonight, I want to say quite categorically that when I think of the last government, and is that to say, and I want to say in all honesty and sincerity, that plenty was at their doorsteps when they took office in 2016. But a generation use of it, a generous use of it, was not made because it languished in the very sight of the supply, i.e. the government and their friends then. Primarily, this is because the government then, who held the exchange of mankind's government, had failed through their own stubbornness and their own incompetence. We must never forget that all the projects that was in the pipeline for the development of the country by the Labour government was simply cancelled. This showed then the callousness of the leader, Alan Chastanet, and his government. From day one, power had got into their heads, or their thick heads. Ladies and gentlemen, Can you believe where we would have been today in terms of development and investment in this country if they had carried on with what was before them, in effect left by the previous government? It would have been simply living in paradise with an excellent health service, education, to be one of the best, and above all, the level of crime would have decreased. Alan and his group of merry men and women seem to suffer from an unrelenting stupidity that they are so sealed off from reality. So much so, there is no credibility in the high echelon of the United Records of the Poor. What I have observed is that many of those who support them are so uninformed. Therefore, I say to this government that you now have to pursue justice without fear or favor. Ladies and gentlemen, no one is above the law. Always remember this. And it must apply here too. Those who violate the law of the land should be brought to justice. I want to say to each and every one of you, my listeners, to moving forward, that at present, we have a decent Prime Minister sent to us from the One Most High. He's doing a lot that was not done before. And he's doing so sometimes under trying circumstances. We must never forget that what the last government left was death and destruction. Even that of the luxury suite was part of that destruction. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we will have a road ahead that is long and difficult, but we are overcoming it with our Prime Minister and with God at our side. Therefore, we must persevere and prevail and must always keep the faith. However, let us always be prepared, because we are still in, for example, in the hurricane season, and we have to be on the alert. I know in my heart that God is good and he is also merciful. As always, I've tried to be honest, because I sincerely believe to be honest is to confront the truth, however unpleasant and inconvenient the truth may be. I believe that we must expose and face it if we are to achieve a better quality of life for those to come, our children and their children. Ladies and gentlemen, I say finally that we must have faith in the Prime Minister and the One Most High, because with this faith, as Martin Luther King Jr. have said, that we will be able to transform the jangling discord of our country into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together and even to pray together and sometimes struggle together, knowing that our families will have 3 meals a day, a good education system for all, a health service unsurpassed by any of the Caribbean country. That will be the day when all of us who are truly God's children and St. Lucians will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Where my fathers died, land we truly see as the Helen of the West." So let us sing loudly from every mountain top, from north to south, to east to west. When we can say aloud, thank God Almighty, that our country is free from those who want to use it and abuse it. However, it was not to be, because God, in his infinite wisdom, believed sincerely that he had anointed a leader who was pure in spirit and in heart. My brothers and sisters, I close by saying to you once again, never, never forget that you were born black, and therefore should be proud of that. God bless you. Go in peace to serve the One Most High. Good night to you all. Bless you in the name of the Holy Father in heaven. Good night and goodbye.